Hello and welcome to the Science Fiction and Fantasy Marketing Podcast, the show where we help you establish your author brand, increase the size of your audience, and sell more books. I'm Lindsay Baroker, and I'm here with...
I'm Jeff Poole.
And I'm Joe Lalo.
And it is just us for the first time in several weeks. We don't have a guest. We're going to be kind of answering for some viewer questions, listener questions, whatever you guys do. And then we're going to be jumping into sharing, especially Joe and I, some of our notes from the Business of Writing workshop that we went to on the Oregon coast. It's probably been about 6 weeks now, so we may be a little fuzzy, but we did take some good notes. So hopefully we'll be able to give you some good information. Hopefully we can get to it all today, but some of the things we want to talk about is handling foreign rights yourself, when it makes sense to incorporate, and some of the new audiobook options that are out there now. And like I said, these are based off our notes. These weren't our lectures, so hopefully we won't get anything wrong. But of course, consult a lawyer before starting a corporation, your accountant, all that good stuff. And we don't play doctors. Only on TV do we play doctors. Is that how it goes? But before we jump into that stuff, do you guys want to let folks know if you have any interesting news?
I just released my 4th mystery, and actually I just about finished with the 5th mystery, which is what I did for NaNoWriMo, which I actually made it. First year I actually completed it. I forget what number fantasy. The second Pirates fantasy I've got is progressing along fairly well, so I hope to have that released end of January, early February, somewhere in there.
Cool. I just announced the pre-order for the Free Wrench collection. So the first 3 stories in my steampunk series are collected together. This is the first time I'm not putting... I usually collect it together with a couple of short stories too. But since I also am planning to release... I'm going to try to release 1 short story per month next year. I figure I will just release those as part of the monthly short story queue. What else? Patreon, there's a Patreon thing going on. Originally, my plan was to release the 1 short, like I was going to start a Patreon and people who subscribed would get the 1 short story per month, but the short story is going to cost 99 cents, and the new Patreon pricing structure would make the lowest possible bid cost about $1.40. So it would not be economically feasible for people to subscribe to my short stories in that way without me putting a lot more bonus material into it than I can probably achieve. So I'm going to restructure any potential Patreon plans, but that's where I am right now.
All right. I didn't know you were playing around with Patreon too. Yeah, I started mine just a few days ago, so I can't really report on the effectiveness or anything. Nobody's gotten charged yet. But the day before I did mine, they released that email saying that they're changing the pricing structure. And boy, there's been a lot of... I got backlash, and I'm like, well, I just started mine. You're not even disappointed because you weren't like at one level and now you're paying more. It just didn't exist before. In my case, I'm doing it a little different than most people, and I'm just doing my novels. Like, people can buy them there instead of buying them on Amazon, like for $5, and they'll get them like a week early. Because I've thought about in the past doing short stories or extra stuff, but I really didn't want to make extra work for myself. As I mentioned like a month ago or so, my main motivation here was in having a way I could get the novels out to people who are not Amazon people. Even if I'm putting the books into Kindle Unlimited, which I'm going to do with the next series. I know it would not be popular with people, but at least I can say, hey, here's an alternative. You can get them through Patreon. And I'm basically using them as a money collector. And then BookFunnel, I'm actually doing it this Thursday, will be the first time the books go out. So I will find out if, people have any trouble supporting or getting the links. Hopefully not. There's not that many people. I think there's about 50 people that signed up for it. I think it's about $400. So, but I'm not necessarily, like I said, expecting to start making $10,000 a month from Patreon. But at least, like I said, I can say, here's a way to get the books, even if you are not a KU person or on Amazon.
Right. That is a self-help book, man. I'm sure there's gonna be a lot of people that buy that one. How to make your living off of Patreon. People will be like, yeah, sign us up.
Well, it's something that I kind of want to talk about probably next month. We'll do like a New Year's episode. Some of the things I see people doing, and I really see, even though there's people are still doing KU and making great money in KU, but I feel like in the author community as a whole, there's a real want to get away from relying 100% or 90% on Amazon. So I do think people will be exploring some other alternatives in the future. Patreon, of course, works best if you've got a fan base already. It's pretty tough to get it rolling if you don't have people that are waiting for your short stories, or in my case, I think I'm probably the only one doing novels because I'm the only one that's writing a whole bunch of novels in a year. So I'm doing it per thing instead of per month. But my other news is that I'm finally going to be releasing the first 3 novels in my new Heritage of Power is the name of the series I finally came up with. It's a spin-off in my Dragon Blood world. It was supposed to be a trilogy. It's now looking to be 5 books. I'll probably end it in such a way that if they sell really well, I could do more, but if they don't, then 5 books was enough. Because like I said, I wasn't planning to put a whole lot of effort, not effort, but like banking on this doing really well. It's just, I love this world, so it was fun for me to come back to it. So we'll see how they do. It's been delayed, not because of my writing speed, but because illustrated covers take a while. I'm actually going to end up having 2 different people illustrating the covers for these 5 books, so we will see how that looks in the end. I do have the same people doing the typography, so of course that will be matching, but I'm hoping it'll turn out all right. So far, I've shared the first cover and got thumbs up on that, so hopefully, I always, with illustrations, I have such a hard time finding ones that I really love, and these ones I think have turned out okay. I was hoping for a little more coolness factor, especially for a book one, but I don't think it'll be disappointing overall. But so I'll finally get those released, and I'll be doing the rapid release mostly because the cover art has forced me into it. So I'm kind of holding it now, even though I have the first 2 ready, because we're coming up on Christmas in a couple weeks, and I think I might just wait and kind of drop everything that week after. Since this is before Christmas is a pretty competitive time, I have some promos on my 3-book omnibus. I've made it free for this in the Dragon Blood world, so hopefully that will feed more readers into the series, and then more people that will check out the spin-off series. So gosh, that's about it from my news, although I will say that I'm deciding not to do a review team this time, which I went back and forth on, because it is really nice if you can just drop your book and have 50 reviews on day one. I think that does help with sales, but Amazon has been deleting reviews, and if you've searched on there lately, you have to like specially select to read the non-verified reviews. I feel like they're just really, if not, they're not outright saying you can't have art teams and stuff, but like they're deleting reviews where they find a link between the reviewer and the author. So it just seems like they're frowning on it a little bit, and I'm just going to try releasing it without doing one and asking in the back of book one for reviews. And something that we've had people on here before say they've done is kind of do a subtle bribe, like once this book gets 50 reviews, I will release a bonus scene, put it up on my blog. I'm thinking of giving that a try, and if I do, I'll let you know how it went.
So Amazon is now deleting reviews, where if it thinks somehow the reviewer is linked / related to the author, then they say, yeah, not verified, and there it's gone.
Or even if it's verified. They've been doing it for a while, but it seems like they've had a new rash of them lately, of people reporting that I lost 5 reviews overnight on my book. And so if some of your reviews go away, that is possibly what happened. And they can do the false positives. A lot of people say, like, I don't know that person, I have no idea who they are. And it may just be something that was suspicious on the other end.
Yeah, God almighty, I want to say something, but I have learned from experience, I will vent once we hit the off air.
Don't get us blacklisted on Amazon.
We love Amazon. Yeah, thank you. Sorry.
I will say, too, I've been trolling for new podcasts because I've kind of gotten tired of the old ones. I wanted to mention, I just downloaded the first few episodes of Smashwords. Mark Coker has a podcast now called the Smart Author Podcast. So I'm going to check that out. And there's actually a lot of new ones coming out there. But I've enjoyed his blogs, even though he is, like Jeff, a little world's largest river in his posts. He's generally had a lot of good information over the years. And they've got like a free marketing book that talks about how, at least on Smashwords, what causes some books to do well and what the best practices are. So I'm checking out that one. And also Kevin J. Anderson, who we had on as a guest back last summer, and he was also at this Business of Writing workshop. He's got a new podcast out with John Best, and it's called Creative Futurism. And it's called a podcast that brings together the worlds of business and creativity, then slings them into the future. And I just grabbed a bunch of episodes. It looks like it's going to be really fun. Then he actually interviewed Mark Lefebvre on there, but it goes well beyond just writing stuff. So check that one out. All right. Do you guys have any other news or anything you want to say before we jump into a few listener questions?
Nothing that won't get my rear blacklisted. So no, I'm good.
No, not for me.
All right. Jeff's going to take himself down, and we're going to go down with him for guilt by association, and then I'm going to be trying to figure out how to live on my $400 a month from Patreon. All right. First question is from Peter. Have you guys used NetGalley? I just saw it online and wasn't sure whether it was a legitimate service with real value or some kind of pseudo-traditional publishing veneer to fleece the indie masses. Peter's trying to get himself blacklisted also. I wasn't sure whether any reviews garnered from NetGalley would be within Amazon's terms of service. So have either of you guys used them?
You know, I've heard of it. I haven't really investigated because I've got a decent amount of reviews there. So I haven't looked into it. So no, that would be a no for me.
When I went to Book Expo America, I went to a panel for NetGalley, and I from what I've heard from the people at Book Expo is it's basically a method to make your book available to the same sort of outlets that do traditional reviews. So it's a little bit of an uphill battle to get those people who do traditional reviews to review an indie book, even if it's in NetGalley. It makes it possible, but doesn't make it really any more likely. So I don't know how really useful it is. When I talked to the NetGalley people, they gently suggested it was more targeted toward like small press than really individual authors. It's not, you can use NetGalley for that sort of thing, but unless you're looking for like, if you're hoping to be like reviewed in a magazine or by like a major book blog, then NetGalley might help you, at least being available there and then giving them a nudge and pointing them. But generally speaking, I don't know how useful it is for an indie. I've never used it, but the reason I didn't use it was because I talked to the people and it seemed like it wasn't for me. I'm pretty sure it would be within Amazon's terms of service, but more to the point, you wouldn't really be using it to get Amazon reviews so much as to get reviews on blogs and stuff.
All right. Glad that you actually went to a panel and talked to them. I've only know what I've seen on Kboards and other sites is that it's about $500, I believe, to get a position with them. But then I've seen indie authors go in kind of like a co-op thing where like 12 people will go in on the $500 thing, and I guess you could put up a book each month under one of their plans. And with Jeff, I think it's there are easier ways to get reviews, especially if you're just worried about Amazon and Goodreads. If you can always do the review team, even if some other reviews are getting deleted now. But I have definitely found that if you ask in the back of the book, some people will review. It's just a matter of getting enough copies of your book out to kind of hit that critical mass so that the 1% or whatever that will review, you've got enough out there to reach those people. And sometimes a free run, even if it's your only book out there, you're probably not going to lose money by doing a free run for like 3 days and just booking a few inexpensive ads. That may be enough to get you a couple thousand downloads. And out of that, hopefully, assuming the writing is good and draws people in, and people get to the end of the book and see your request, some of them may go ahead and do a review.
Oh, I would say I was, when I first started out, I had a low amount of reviews as well. And I heard somewhere, maybe from you, Lindsay, I'm not too sure where I heard it, but someone said, you got to put something at like a simple little request at the back of the book saying, hey, loved it, hated it. I can take critique either way. Just do me a favor and review it wherever you bought the book from. And my amount of reviews jumped as soon as I did that. So there are people out there who will do that.
Yeah, I've kind of informally tested it, not asking and asking, because for later books in the series, I tend not to worry about it. But for that book one, when you're hoping people will try it, I often ask in the back. And I found I get about twice as many reviews when I ask as if you say nothing and just expect people to do it. Most people are not thinking about it. They're like, what's next in the library? Or they're going on to buy your next book, which is good, but you're probably not going to get as many reviews if they're skipping it on to the next one.
Very true.
All right. Next question is from Zach. This is actually an easy one. I'll test you guys to see if you know the answer. If you have a book in KU, what are the rules for selling print versions?
I'm muting myself.
I'm sure I could dig through all the rules online and find the answer myself, but in case it's a complicated answer, I wanted to ask some pros. I found an affordable printer and wanted to have some physical copies to sell at conventions and such, but wouldn't want to get in trouble if I'm also in Kindle Unlimited. Jeff is muted.
As
He's
far as
not
I
answering.
know, as far as I know, print is fine. It doesn't fall under KU's banner.
Yes, that is correct. Good job. No, but because I'll have my audiobooks and the print books will be available in the other stores. It's just the ebooks that you cannot sell on your site. You know, I would think maybe giving them away at conventions, ebooks might be okay. I don't know. You'd have to go check through the TOS. I know you're only supposed to give away like 10% of the ebook if you're selling it on a site. So.
Yeah, the brief time I was in KU, yeah, I didn't have any problem selling the print edition. I don't remember exactly what the verbiage was, but it just says, print or digital versions only, does not pertain to print. So I created it right through Amazon's own company, CreateSpace, and it worked just fine. Joe, I've got to ask, do you have an alien spaceship in that thing behind you? Because I see it pulsing all kinds of colors there.
No, it's just it's very Christmassy.
It's Christmas colors.
Okay.
Those are not the colors of the transporter beam. Come on, Jeff.
I didn't say transporter beam. I said an alien. There's something over there that's glowing. So I just.
All right. Everybody knows aliens glow blue, not green and red. All right. Next question is from Holly, not about spaceships. She says, I am releasing a novel under a pen name and would like another opinion. Does the pen name need a social media presence? Do I need a separate Goodreads account? I guess I'm the pen name person, so.
Yeah, I've thought about creating a name, but I've never done it. So, Lindsay, I think this one's yours.
All right. So I'll tell you what I did for Ruby. Ruby is not on Twitter. Ruby does have a Facebook page because I could just build that under my own personal page, and it's very easy to check the various pages you have. So that was pretty easy to do. And the Facebook page allows you to do the boosted posts and some of the advertising stuff. So it's probably not a bad idea to have one. You may find, like I do, that you tend to forget to post on it. Like if you're working on a series under your other name and not doing anything with the pen name for a while, it's probably a good idea to just pop in there and say like, hey, what have you read? This is the book I'm reading that's, in the genre that your pen name writes. Other social media sites I don't worry about for either of my names. I did originally open a separate Goodreads account for Ruby and posted, like before I had any books out, I posted on the Sci-Fi Romance. They've got a little thing, and I tried to give away some copies. Looking back, that was probably a waste of time, and I didn't stick with it, so I don't think that helped me sell any books. Probably wouldn't bother. The only thing you might want to do it is early on, before you have many people reading the books, you would probably have to add your books to the Goodreads library yourself so that they'll be represented there. Jeff is dancing.
Remember when I warned you about my dog? Yeah, she just came in, so ignore me.
All right. Okay. But so that would be the only thing, is you might want to make an account. Usually later on, what happens to me is people add the books for me. I don't know how this happens. Magic, the librarians do it. But I think in the beginning you may want to do it for that. But yeah, I think the Facebook page is probably the only thing I would do social media wise. Definitely do have a website. It can just be kind of a static site that lists the books, but have a way for people to contact you, and you will definitely want to do a newsletter, because that's what we always talk about on the show. It's kind of the most reliable way to get a hold of your fan base. So the website gives you a place to put the form for the newsletter, so another reason to have it. Again, I wouldn't do a blog unless you're really going to get into it and you're positive that you want to put up content quite often. All right, do you guys have any thoughts on pen names before we move on?
No, I think you've covered it, for me anyways.
No, yeah, I was of the same opinion as you, so I'm glad that not having a pen name, I'm glad that I was thinking about them correctly.
All right, so when you start that special sci-fi or paranormal romance pen name with where you're going to wear corsets, now you'll know.
Exactly. I'll do it correctly.
All right, make sure to put a picture with the corset for your author photo. One more listener question before we move on to our notes. Beth asks, in your opinions, in today's market, what are the most important things to consider when deciding whether to pursue self-publishing or traditional publishing with a new series? You guys want to jump in on that first?
I would think the biggest motivating factor for a lot of people is going to be is the amount of royalties you get, because traditional, what is it now, 8-10%, you get our royalties, and granted you sell a lot more, but there, as we've talked about before, there's a lot of us indies that we're getting around 70% of the royalties, so we can actually out earn a lot of the traditional publishers. So I right now I like having control. I'm just a control freak, so I really enjoy being an indie author.
Yeah, I agree that probably the key thing is the amount of money that you can make. If you are not comfortable doing a lot of the stuff that's required for self-publishing, like, formatting all that, I mean, you can just hire people to do it. But if you genuinely feel like you need the industry helping you to do stuff, then maybe pursue traditional. But generally speaking, I think there's not a whole lot that would point you toward traditional that you couldn't do better as an indie right now.
My thoughts are, first off, do you have the patience? There's nothing wrong, in my opinion, there's nothing wrong with trying to go traditional. A lot of folks that are doing well now as hybrid authors got their start in traditional publishing, and then that really helped them build their name. And when they started some small novellas and things on the side, they were like, oh, hey, these sell well because people already know who I am. So there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, personally, I probably wouldn't consider it unless it's kind of the big five. It's not that small presses don't have any use, but a lot of the stuff they do, you can learn to do yourself and without giving them the money, especially if it was an ebook only kind of thing. So something to consider there. And also I would look at your genre, and is it one that's popular with traditional publishing? Are you checking the agents' pages and are they saying, we want this completely right now, this is what I'm really looking for? And that'll tell you, because they are very less of the niche stuff. I've mentioned before on here, the reason indies can do, or so many have done really well in the sci-fi romance, is that traditional publishing doesn't really touch it because it's very niche, and you might sell 10,000 copies, which for them is not good enough. For us, that can be a great living if you're writing a few books a year. But so they tend to look for the stuff where, oh, it's going to sell 100,000 copies, no problem. And the other thing is, do you mind giving up the control, going back and forth with the editing process? If you do get a deal, it's of course not a sure thing. You can always try it, but you're kind of probably in the same boat as any other new author. You might have to build connections, go to conferences, conventions, and try to meet the agents and publishers. If that's something that's appealing to you, then great. If you're a total introvert and that sounds horrifying, then thank goodness that we can do it indie and all online right now, right? And then the other thing is that your series is going to be tied up for a long time if you do choose to do the querying route. And even if you get interest and it goes to publishers, and even if you get a deal, you're probably looking at 2 years before your first book gets published. And in that time, you're not making any money from the series. You may lose excitement over the book and run off and do another series on the side. So those are just some things to consider. And Jeff, did you want to go ahead and ask your viewer question?
Sure. I got one from Nikolai, and he's got a question for you. Lindsay, are you looking at BookFunnel as a sales platform? I've heard they're going to offer integration on your author site. That is a direct quote.
Absolutely. And I actually just emailed them to see if we can get Damon to come back on in 2018 here, because they've done a bunch of new things, and they've also got authors who are doing some really interesting things. I got to talk to him at the 20 Books conference, and it was cool to see what some really creative people are doing. But so yeah, what they're doing now is that they are integrating with PayPal, and they've got some code you can install on your site if you want to sell directly from your site. One of the things, though, that's kind of turned me off of that is the fact that, A, you have to do customer service if you are the person kind of handling things on your site. BookFunnel also does customer service, but you're going to get more questions, I think, when it's on your site. And B, you have to figure out the sales tax, apparently, which is different in every state in the US, and it gets complicated. And I started reading about it, and I was just like, oh man, this is not worth the time to learn about this. So basically that's why I picked Patreon for now, because they're handling that. They'll just send me a monthly, whatever my 95% is. But it is something that I will look forward to in the future, especially if internet tax gets simpler at some point. So I think the thing with the state tax is you have to collect it based on where the person who purchases your book lives. And it sounds difficult and like a lot of work for a $5 ebook. So that is my thoughts on that. All right, are you guys ready to jump to our convention notes?
Fire away.
All right, first off, I guess we'll just kind of sum and talk a little bit about it. Joe, do you want to go first? Like, did you think it was a good experience? And like, what was some of the stuff there that you appreciated learning?
Yeah, I think it was for me. I mean, this is the first conference of any sort that I've gone to since becoming a full-time author, which is kind of shameful because I've been one for a while.
Real quick, could you say what that convention is?
I just have it in my notes as the Oregon Coast Writers Conference. I think it was the Business of Writing Conference.
Yeah, it's the Business of Writing. That's a good point. We should say what it was because it's an annual thing. If people are interested, they can look it up. And it is hosted on the Oregon coast in Lincoln City by Catherine Rush. You've probably seen her blog around. And Dean Wesley Smith. They work together. You've probably seen his blog too. And they have WGM Publishing is their organization. And they've been in the business of selling short stories and novels and just about everything you can imagine since the 80s, I believe. So it was good to spend time with people that have that much experience and have seen all the ups and downs over the years. You know, I've mentioned before that as indie authors, if you got your start here with the Kindle in 2009 or since then, we haven't really seen a big crash, recession kind of thing yet. So we don't know what will happen when the next time things cycle down. So but that was the name of the conference, was just the Business of Writing, I believe. And it was geared, there was a lot of people that had been traditionally published and gotten their rights back and were kind of figuring out how to now make money as indie authors. And there were some indies too. So it was geared toward people that had a few books out already. And so it wasn't really writing stuff necessarily.
No, there was one day on productivity that sort of easing us in, and then the rest of it very quickly got into very, very deep business stuff. And that's what I think was most useful for me is there was some nitty gritty on stuff I'd never thought of before and stuff that like is still evolving. I think we were talking about IP valuations, the thing that's kind of weird that I'd not really thought about before. Plus, it was an opportunity for me to like rub elbows with other authors because we were hanging around with people who had hit New York Times bestseller list and stuff like that. It was a very good networking opportunity for me. And also the first time I went to the West Coast. So overall, good experience, I feel. And I have 50 pages of notes in a digital file and a big spiral notebook of takeaways that I've been working on since then.
All right, yeah, and I liked the, you know, there was about half of it was kind of old stuff to me. I listen to all the podcasts and I've been to a couple conventions and so the marketing kind of stuff was pretty familiar territory for me, but what I appreciated was there was a couple days where they were talked about dealing with your taxes, like if you're making six figures and what you should be doing. They talked about like, they're both really have had agents before and we're really into learning everything and doing it yourself now. Maybe if you have to, hiring an IP attorney, but it was interesting to find out how much like Chris just handles on her own. And she's really smart on all this stuff. I actually finally ordered her book and I'm going to have it as a reference book. She's got one on like kind of being your own agent and handling contracts and things. So they talked about what to do when you're approached with foreign rights, especially as an indie author or somebody who's not like tied in with the publisher. And what else was there on those 2 days? The Matt Buckman, ML Buckman, he was on there. He's been on a couple podcasts lately, but he talked about estate planning and stuff that I tend to not even think about since I don't have kids. But I better figure it out because you don't want your heirs being stuck not knowing what the heck to do if something does happen and maybe owing a bunch of money if your IP is considered valuable. So there was there was about a 2-hour lecture on what to do if Hollywood comes calling, which I took the ton of notes on. That actually hasn't happened to me. I've definitely gotten the foreign rights inquiries, but I guess nobody's looking to make spaceships and dragons into movies right now, at least not mine. But it is interesting because you don't necessarily have to be a big name. I have run into just, you know, I remember a steampunk author that I don't think she sells tons, but the right person happened to read her novel and wanted to option it. But I guess we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go down in our notes here. But do you have any questions, Jeff, or anything before I'm going to talk a little bit about what they talked about regarding taxes and incorporating.
Thus far, not yet. I'd like to hear more about. One thing I'm real shady on is all the whole taxes / corporations bit. You guys got a huge little section about there, so I'm looking forward to this.
All right, that's nothing. I pruned my notes down a lot for our to put into our little document.
You take a lot of notes? No, say it ain't so.
I actually didn't. Jeff's got a lot more than I do, but there were the couple, the couple sections that I knew nothing about, so it was great.
Did you just call Joe Jeff? You just said Jeff got a lot more than I did?
Possibly.
My mom does that all the time.
You know the listeners don't know you guys apart, right? I get told that all the time. I'm like, and they're like, they're two guys. Their names start with J. So just be happy.
It doesn't really matter which one is which, really.
Just the one with the glowing green and red cabinet behind him. All right. So some thoughts on the tax stuff. And what was interesting is, and Dean did this presentation, and they've got, I think, 4 corporations right now, but they're doing a lot, right? They've got bookstores, physical bookstores that they own. They've got their publishing business, plus whatever they do on the side, selling, publishing their own novels, and a magazine, and I don't know what all else they do. I think they have a knick-knack store or antiques, something like that too, in Lincoln City. So they've got a lot going on, but still, I was curious that Dean suggested that C Corporation is actually what you want to do. You know, he said pretty much almost right away if you're earning money. And then we also kind of cornered Matt Buckman at dinner one night, and he's researched this stuff too, and he was more like, maybe when you get over like 120,000 a year, that's when you want to consider that. But either way, a lot of writers right now, because I'm in the same boat, they're just kind of going to their local accountants that are not special. They're not people that specialize in creative types, which we are. We're not just like a bookstore. We are doing interesting things where we're getting, maybe royalties if you're in traditional publishing, or we're getting all digital income that's not in a specific state. And we may be doing things where we're publishing box sets, and technically we're publishing and paying other people out of the earnings from that. So we're actually doing some more stuff that's more complicated than, here where I live, it's kind of a retirement town. So a lot of people just have pretty simple tax returns, I guess. That's kind of how my accountant is. So I'm going to be looking for someone that's a creative accountant, which is what they called it. Not creative in that they're doing illegal things, but they specialize in handling like artists, authors, musicians, and people like that are dealing with royalties and different kinds of income. But his point with the C Corporation, as opposed to like an LLC, which is what a lot of us do, or even an S Corporation, is that most of the money passes through with those entities, and you can do a few little things, but you're basically going to end up paying tax on most of the money on your personal tax statement. So with the C Corporation, all the money goes to the corporation, and then you would pay yourself as an employee. If necessary, they had all kinds of creative ways you could not take that much money out.
The capacity for shenanigans in this is very high.
Right. You want to make sure you've got a really rock solid accountant if you start doing the more creative stuff. I think that I'm interested in just doing it and setting it up where I'm an employee and maybe I'm paying myself $60,000 a year or something. And then I would only pay my taxes on that money that I get, like a normal W-2 kind of tax return. The corporation has its own tax return, but they are taxed at a lower income rate than corporations are taxed at a lower rate than people making 6 figures are, because just as once you get up into 6 figures, just as like a sole proprietor or even an LLC, you're probably paying close to 50%, depending on what your state taxes are. You're probably doing like 40% almost to the IRS, and then could be as much as another 10% for your state. So the whole idea was that they were looking for ways that, like if your corporation is doing it, not only are they paying at a lower tax rate, as long as the money is locked up in the corporate bank account, but then they could start doing things like your corporation pays for your gym membership because it's in the best interest of the corporation for you to be healthy. And then they pay for your health insurance and all your retirement. You can put a lot of money into retirement without paying the taxes on it at this time. So there were just a lot of things that the corporation could buy that were legitimate expenses, all of your business expenses. It might even buy it one day, the office where you work, or you buy your home and then rent to your corporation the cost of the office space. Again, you're going to need an accountant that's, it's going to be worth paying a little more, especially if you are in the six figures or more area, to get an accountant that has done this kind of stuff. Although interesting, I kind of cracked up when somebody asked, okay, so how do you set up the corporation? You need a high-priced lawyer. And Dean was like, no, I just use LegalZoom. And I don't know if I would do that, but it sounded like the corporation itself is not that complicated to set up, but then you want the accountant to, and at this point too, you're going to need payroll, somebody doing payroll to pay you. And if you have any employees, it did get complicated, but the takeaway was that you could pretty much save yourself a lot of money on taxes in the end by being willing to spend to set everything up, have a really good accountant, and maybe have a bookkeeper and a payroll person, depending on if you start hiring a lot of VAs, and some people even end up hiring a full-time employee, that kind of thing. So I know you're not all there yet, but it's something to think about. Unlike me, who was just for 7 years doing my TurboTax, actually probably 17 years if you add in all the years I was just self-employed and not as an author, as a sole proprietor. And you give a lot of money back to the IRS. They should love me. They never audit me. That should tell me something right there, that I'm giving them too much money. Did you have some thoughts on that section, Joe?
Oh yeah, I was initially concerned because again, the first person talking about it was Dean, and Dean is wheeling and dealing. Like nothing he's doing is illegal, but it is exceptionally creative in the pushing the limits of what's appropriate. But then when we went out, we had dinner with Matt Buckman, and he was sort of talking about like you don't have to go nearly as crazy as all that. It can really be as simple as just making yourself an employee and reimbursing yourself for the things that a business would reimburse you for. So that made me a little bit more comfortable. I don't think I'm going to do it this year, but we'll see if next year looks like it's going to be a particularly successful year. I'm probably going to take the time early in the year and set it up. But nothing really. The thing that I was particularly interested in is they talked about there's something called medical reimbursement, and health insurance is a major thing if you're self-employed. So I kind of wanted to read into that, and but that was about it.
Right, that's a pretty major expense, especially if you have a family or you've had some existing health problems. So your insurance deductible or your monthly fee is quite expensive. I'm also probably going to wait and just not try to do it this year. Although it was interesting, and I highlighted this in bold, and it said, if you do create a corporation and you change, suddenly you've got a new EIN instead of like a social security number, or if you're changing from like an LLC to a C Corp. If you go into Amazon, PayPal, Kobo, and Apple and change it, like if you changed it right now, today, December 12th or whatever this is, it would apply to the whole year. So apparently, even if you don't get right on the ball and start this on January 1st, you can still, get everything rolling and retroactively. I think he said Barnes & Noble, that was not the case, but at the other stores, you could do it.
And real quick, I've got an actual viewer question regarding that sort of thing. Benjamin just asked, do you consider the C Corp at six figures? Does that mean it's sole proprietor until then?
I think Matt suggested up to about 60,000 sole proprietor, because he's done a whole bunch of research on this stuff. And
he had a threshold. It was up to 60 sole proprietor. Between 60 and about 120, I guess, was S Corp sort of makes sense. And then once you get up into the reasonable six-figure range is when C Corp makes sense.
Right, because you have to pay some fees when you incorporate, and then that's an ongoing yearly expense. So do wait till you're making at least some money, I would say. And until then, if it's mostly hobby money, I joke because I use TurboTax, but it worked perfectly fine for basic stuff. They're actually pretty good at walking you through. Here's your home office. Let's figure out how much of it applies to, how much percentage of your house your home office is, so we can write off that percentage of the utilities and all that. So, but I'm sure you should have an accountant. Don't be like me. I would be the first to admit I'm horrible about Like I pay attention and I listen to the business advice, and then I just never do anything. I'm like, no, I want to write the next novel. Writing the novel is
Do
fun.
as I say, don't do as I do.
I love it when I meet people who are so much more together than I am with this stuff. They started like last year and they just got it down. I'm like, wow, you're awesome. I'm just going to write more books. That's all. I'll figure it out someday. Alrighty. So I think they were just, obviously keep really good records in every receipt, especially if you're going to start doing this stuff. You should be doing that anyway, though. I love that with everything being digital, pretty much you can just dump everything into a folder on your inbox. I deal with mine once a year, or once a month would be more ideal, especially if you have an accountant and you need to send stuff to. But fortunately, we're mostly digital, and that is nice. I have to say it's a pain in the butt when you travel, and I'm like, oh, should I keep that Starbucks receipt or no?
Just make sure you back up your computer.
I do. I'm pretty obsessive because I almost lost stuff once. So I'm like Dropbox for all the writing and also have external hard drive backup. Although you can get all your receipts, almost everything that comes through PayPal and stuff, and FreshBooks, you can get those if you need them later. So scrolling down. Intellectual property valuation was something that was talked about quite a bit, but like Joe said, it seems very up in the air. Like, how much is your book worth? At one point, does it become worth tons? If it was made into a movie or something. Joe, do you have any better notes than I do on this? It sounded like just kind of something we need to keep an eye on and think about, especially for errors in the estate planning. But if you were selling Dean was doing some stuff where they sold the rights to their work to their corporation. I don't know. Are your notes better than mine?
Yeah, I mean, the IP valuation, basically, the key part was your IP has value. I mean, whatever, Star Wars was sold for billions of dollars. So what you have to remember is if you're running a corporation and you put your IP in the hands of your corporation, then that is now value added to the corporation, which can be depreciated and all that crazy tax stuff, which made my head spin a little bit. But you also have to remember, if you end up with, say, if you have kids and you have 10 franchises under your belt, right now the IP valuation is not standardized in any way. So when you die, the accountants might take all of your IPs and say, well, there's 15 IPs and Star Wars is worth $1 billion, so this person has $15 billion in assets, and now you need to pay 10% estate tax on that to your kids. And it's not actually that money, it's just imaginary value. So that was one of the big things was talking about, like, you need to figure out, be aware that this is value, and that the value may one day be taxed, and just have a plan for that. But you can't really make the plan for that right now because the law on this is so early on, there's nothing standardized.
All right, cool. Well, yeah, it's just something to keep in mind. And I think Joanna Penn actually had the best advice. She said, just don't claim anywhere that your stuff has value right now at this point, so that there's no trouble, down the road. Or just, I think when Dean was talking about selling stuff to his corporation, they gave it a very basic, what's the going rate for a novel if you sold it to traditional publishing? $3,000. Okay, that's what this IP is worth. All right, but let's move on to things that more of you may be interested in right now. Oh, we're going to get to foreign rights. Did I? Yeah, I have that at the end. So hopefully we're going to get to the right. But let's just breeze through. I've got a stuff here on virtual assistants, and I can just kind of read through this. Joanna was the one to give a talk on this, and I think she has 9 virtual assistants. That was what she said, but she has which was interesting to me. They're very specific people that do very specific things. Like one person edits your podcast, right? And one is your editor is kind of a virtual assistant. Your cover designer is going to be kind of a virtual assistant. Maybe you end up having somebody that handles your email. If you get to the point where you're getting a lot of reader email, I like to handle that myself. I could see having, like in her case, in Joanna's case, she's got the nonfiction stuff too, and gets a whole bunch of email from her podcast and her nonfiction. And I think she's got a virtual assistant that just sort of has a frequently asked questions and can kind of paste in the answer for a lot of that stuff. What she suggested was that you kind of start things with like a small task just to try somebody out. Don't just go out and hire somebody that's going to work 40 hours a week for you. Make sure you're only hiring out things that are going to improve your bottom line and really be worth it. I sometimes see authors hiring virtual assistants to handle their promotions and things like big group promotions and things. And I don't know, I always kind of wonder, like, are you just throwing money at that? Is that actually going to be something that makes you $10,000 this month? And only they know the answer to it, but I feel like I see a lot of people hiring virtual assistants to do things that didn't need to be done, or that are kind of on the, yeah, do it if you have time thing, but probably are not going to increase your sales. So just be aware of that. And she suggested that when you hire people, just give them one task that takes 4 hours and see how that works. And like I said, hiring very specific people with specific talents to do a certain thing, it's hard because I feel like most of us want just to hand it off to somebody. All the things we don't like to do, we want to just find one person that we can pay 10 or 20 hours a week, and they'll just do everything. But it's not really realistic to find somebody that's going to be that good and that experienced in this whole thing. If they were, they'd be selling their own books and making piles. And not, that's not to say there aren't people out there that are doing the virtual assistant things for authors and are doing a good job, but it's hard to find those people. And a lot of times you'll find that the author kind of trained them, and so you got to take that time to invest in somebody. And in some cases, it may be better to do somebody you know really well, so you can just take them to lunch and talk about things.
Okay, so with regards to finding virtual assistant, can you just go to virtualassistant.com? Because my thing is, I don't think I could trust someone enough to, like, oh, hey, here's my username and password to get into this particular site. Good luck with it. I mean, I just don't think I could do that. Not yet, anyways.
Yeah, and that's going to be on you, on each individual person, what comfort level you're at when you hire somebody. You may want to, that may be something you never do, is have them do like uploading the ebooks for you, because you do have to give off your password and username for that. You may not want them to ever do something where they have access or see your income and your bank statements and things. But some people, especially, we've had somebody on that their VA was in the same town as them and they knew them really well. In that case, you may be really comfortable with the person and there's no problem giving them your password because you know where they live, and find them with a baseball bat if they take your money. And Upwork was the name of the site that she mentioned as a possible way to find people and just try them out. And there are a lot of things you can have people do that don't involve them needing your passwords. All right, Joe, did you want to add anything to that?
Just the one thing that I had not thought of that they mentioned was, it's like, well, I am a PC user. I don't have a Mac, and there's not a whole lot that I need a Mac for, but Vellum is something that people buy a Mac just to use Vellum. And there are people who hire a VA who has access to the programs you need that aren't, accessible to you. And it can be really economical to just farm out the one task that you need that program for to a person who has that program, instead of putting together the ecosystem and learning how to use the thing. So that was one thing I found pretty interesting.
There you go. Find somebody that already paid the $200 unlimited Vellum fee, and maybe they'll do your ebooks for you. All right. For a couple of days, we had Mark Lefebvre, formerly from Kobo and now off doing his own thing. He was there, and he talked about some of the Kobo stuff, including, let's just talk briefly about library pricing, because that's something you can do now when you upload a book on Kobo. You'll see a little checkbox. Do you want to make this available for libraries? And Joe, I know you took notes on this. Do you want to mention what he said?
The key thing that I learned is that libraries are less likely to purchase a book that costs 99 cents or is free. Like, you really want to price it starting at, say, the $2.99 range. Even if your book is free or costs less than $2.99, there's just sort of a mental rule of thumb that librarians tend to have when making purchases, that they avoid stuff on the lower price point. And I went through, while I was at the conference, actually, I went through and just changed all of my library prices to $2.99. And I didn't really keep track of it before, but on a quick just sort of comparison from last month to this month, I saw a reasonable increase in library sales. So it seems like that piece of advice is useful.
So if you're offering them for free, they want to see the Okay, what's the downside here?
Yeah, it's true. Like, I for the longest time was doing my library price as free. I'm like, I'll help out the libraries, and I wasn't seeing a lot of just utilization, since it's not sales. But if they want, if they equate price with value, and therefore don't want to get a book that has no value, then I'm perfectly willing to price things into their expectations.
Well, I guess I know what I'm doing as soon as this thing is over.
And in my case, I hadn't even gone in and to like the back catalog to books that were uploaded to Kobo before the library option became a thing. I'd never gone in and put check marks on those books, so I actually did that at the conference while Joe was changing his prices. But the logic they gave was that actually libraries are used to getting charged a lot more by publishers. Like they might have to pay $40, $50 for an ebook because the publisher is assuming that dozens of people are going to check out that ebook. And while we may not necessarily want to charge $40, I'm like Joe, I'm like, I want to give them a good deal so they'll buy my book. You don't necessarily need to charge any less than the full retail price of your book, and you could try charging a little more if you wanted to. And I do feel like gradually it's like a slow process, but more and more libraries are getting some of the indie ebooks, whether it's, we talked to Dale when he was on here, whether it's stuff that lists or readers from the local library recommended to them, or they're just trying to kind of curate and find some of the ones that are selling well and getting them for their patrons. So it's not, you can make a little money by checking the box and selling to the libraries. All right, and Kobo also talked about Findaway Voices, and something that Drafted Digital has also been talking about is that there are now some audiobook distribution options coming along that are to compete with Audible/Amazon. So it may be worth, to this point, I've just been checking the box. Yeah, you can have my rights for 7 years, whatever. There's nowhere else to sell them. And I read enough books that I just figure I'll just change it down the line if things change. And now things are changing. Kobo is going to be adding, I believe, just audio. Were they adding audiobooks to their site, or were they making a deal with somebody? I feel like they were adding them to their site. Is that?
I think that's correct.
So, and then they recommended Findaway Voices as a place to possibly get your audiobooks done. It kind of sounded like a competitor of Audible. They're not asking for anything exclusive. At Audible, also, you don't have to click the exclusive thing. I think you get 40% if you choose exclusive versus 25% if you're non-exclusive. And in my case, I've always gotten all the MP3s from the narrator, so it would be no real problem to just continue. Like if you have a narrator you like on ACX, you could just keep using that person but stop clicking the exclusive box with the mind that you're going to upload it Kobo. And it sounds like there's going to be maybe some more options. Drafted Digital doing some stuff with getting audiobooks out there. I mean, we're going to see, I guess, eventually if anybody becomes a serious competitor to Audible/Amazon. One thing that was appealing with the Findaway Voices is there's no minimum length. So you can put together a couple short stories and sell it for $1.99. Whereas with Audible, they choose the pricing. This way you could choose the pricing. And also with Audible, because so many people are on the credit system, it disincentivizes using those credits on cheaper, shorter audiobooks. So those books have tended to perform poorly over there. I feel like if your stuff's anything under 10 hours, people are kind of like, I could get this 20-hour book over here for the same credit, so I'm going to lean that way. Do you have anything, Joe, besides?
I had 2 books that I did through ACX that were non-exclusive. I didn't do exclusive on any of the 2 books that I've done. So I actually went through and put them on Findaway Voices. Findaway Voices works almost exactly like ACX in terms of how you get a book made. And it's basically the key difference that I've noticed. Number 1 is that it sells in a lot more stores. And number 2, that you get to set your own price. And other than that, if you've ever done anything on ACX, then you can literally, if you went non-exclusive, just move it straight over to Findaway and then unclick the Amazon Audible distribution checkbox, and you will get into 6 or 7 more stores, which are probably going to get you another 5% in sales, because I'm sure Amazon and Audible has got everything cornered. But super easy, and again, you get to set your own price, which is something I've been looking for a while.
Yeah, because we haven't had a way to run sales on audiobooks at all. So that's kind of why there's no BookBub of audiobooks, because we can't just say, okay, my book's going to be $1.99 this week. Do you know, because this was where I'm a little fuzzy. It sounds like Kobo's adding audiobooks. Do you know where you're actually selling to through Findaway?
I can take a look, and they have a list of distributors. It's a lot. There's probably 9 additional things. Audiobook.com is one of them, and there's a few. I'll take a look.
All right, because that's what I was wondering with all this. So like, oh, great, we don't have to be exclusive with Amazon Audible anymore. But then you're like, well, but who are we selling with? But I will be interested to see how the Kobo integration works. I'm also hoping to get them on the show next year. It's been a couple years since we talked to Mark last, and I guess maybe Christine Monroe is the new Kobo author relations person. So maybe she will deign to join us on the show. We should see. I shouldn't throw anybody out there before they before they agree. Although if you guys write to her and say you should go on the show, maybe we'll be more likely to get people.
If you want a rapid fire list of the places that they sell to, there's Audible, Amazon, Apple is one line, and that's the stuff that ACX sort of goes through. Then there's Barnes & Noble Nook, Scribed, TuneIn, eStories, formerly eMusic, Playster, 24 Symbols, Downpour, Audiobooks.com, Hummingbird, Libro.fm, Audiobooks Now, coming soon, and then a list of library sites. So there you are.
All right, cool. Well, you'll have to update us and let us know if you're making some money on those other sites.
I haven't been there for a whole month yet, so we'll find out.
Yeah, maybe next summer or something, we'll check in and see. Jeff, are you doing any of your own audiobooks yet?
Not yet. It's kind of there on the back burner that I'd like to do. I just haven't got around to it yet.
Yeah, I actually mentioned this I've done several now through ACX, and I'm doing the backlist stuff because Podium Publishing has done all the popular stuff or the stuff that, they've contacted me when it's new. So they're making more money off my books than I am. But the ACX backlist stuff that I'm doing, I'm finding it's taking a while to break even. I believe I will on it, like The Emperor's Edge and that kind of stuff before the 7 years is up. But it's really more of a investment for the long term, or something to do when you're making enough money in the other stuff that it doesn't matter. I will say that when I did the latest Ruby series on my own, and my goal was to try to get the books out quickly after the ebook publication, because that's one of the things that if your audiobook doesn't come out for 6 or 12 months until after your release of the ebook, and your sales have already, you've had your big boom and now you're on the downslide, then it's hard to expect the audiobooks to do really well. I feel like if you're probably selling like 400 or 500 copies a month of your ebooks, that's probably the point where maybe the break-even point where it's going to be worth it for you to do the audiobooks on your own through ACX or Findaway Voices. I haven't tried them out yet, but might consider them. I really like the narrator I have right now through ACX, so I might be more inclined to just check the non-exclusive box and stay with them for now. But moving on from audiobooks. Oh, Joe, before we go into the foreign rights stuff, did you want to talk about what you're doing with Ingram Spark? I know it was recommended that we have books not just on CreateSpace, but with Ingram Spark.
Yeah, just very quickly, it was recommended not to delist from CreateSpace, just do your instead of doing extended distribution through CreateSpace, if you do it through Ingram Spark, there's some benefits. First of all, indie bookstores don't like working with CreateSpace because it's an Amazon company and Amazon is their enemy. So if you go through Ingram, then you basically look like a major publisher. So there's that. You can also lower the price of your CreateSpace book if you take it off of extended distribution, because most of the cost is trying to cover the minimum price required to get to extended. So I was able to drop the cost of all of my ebooks by like $3. I'm a print books by like $3 by doing that. And so I've moved exactly one book over, and I've finished the process, but I'm not going to do the rest immediately because it's not perfectly easy and it's not free. Technically, you can call and get them to move stuff over directly. You can just say, hey, could you convert my book over from CreateSpace to Ingram? It's not like an official thing, but you can sort of get a representative to do it for you, but only if you already own your own ISBN. So I used the CreateSpace ISBN, so I needed to purchase new ISBNs for Ingram Spark, and that costs money. It's cheaper to do it in a big collection from Bowker directly. And every time you sort of finish a book and set it to be published, there's a fee for that too, as opposed to doing free updates the way CreateSpace does. So if you have 20 books to do, it's going to cost a not insubstantial amount of money. So I'm probably going to do it very slowly because I don't honestly expect to make a lot of money from this. But all things considered, the files are equivalent. And so if you've done it through CreateSpace, it's no more difficult to do it through Ingram. They'll just sort of I think I had to adjust one cover because I was literally a millimeter too far out. But that's about it. Like you'll look more attractive to libraries and indie bookstores, but you're going to put a little bit of money up front and a little bit of work up front.
All right, cool. I'm glad you're doing it so you can tell me all about the pitfalls before I try to do it. It may be something where I just do it going forward with new titles rather than trying to move all the backlist stuff over, since I've got 50 novels between me and my pen name at this point. And I do actually have a block of ISBNs that I bought early on in my publishing career when I thought I would need them. So we can negotiate after the show if you want. I think I've got like 250 of them just
Nice.
posted to the cork board that I've never even used one of them. But I think the main reason was the libraries, and also that you could make it price it low enough that a bookstore could afford to order it. Like right now, they're not going to order from $10.99 from CreateSpace because then they have to sell it for $17, and who wants to pay that much for a paperback?
That's one of the things you're allowed to choose with Ingram is basically the discount rate. Like you can go to the 55% standard discount rate that bookstores are expecting, and as soon as they see that, they're like, "Oh, well, this is not a terrible expense." But there's still that you can also apparently check returns. Yes, I'm not going to do that because I don't want people shipping me books. So keep that in mind, I suppose.
All right, Jeff, did you want to ask that question or questions?
Well, it's just that Craig apparently was asking about for what Joe said. Joe, he has his own ISBN. What did he say again to change to Ingram? Find a rep at Ingram. He was just asking about that. If you could repeat that one more time.
Basically, there's not like a button on Ingram's page that says, "Hey, could you move all of my CreateSpace stuff over?" You have to email them and ask. Actually, I think you might have to call them and ask. So you're going to get the support number and just talk to them about doing a title conversion.
This is something you'd have a VA do.
Yes.
This sounds like a perfect test for a VA. Just move all my books over to this Ingram Spark place, please.
Hey, buddy, you want to make a buck? Here's what I need you to do.
I do like the idea of the CreateSpace books costing less, though, if you uncheck the expanded distribution, because that's, I have a lot that are like $10.99, and that's just how much it has to be for the pages that they are, and I don't even want to direct people to them. I'm like, don't pay that much for a paperback. I'm only going to make a buck, and you can get the ebook for 99 cents or $3.99. So
if you take it off expanded distribution, who's that taking it away from? Is it like for instance, providing it to libraries, or what else does that go to? I forget.
Yeah, expanded distribution on Kindle, on CreateSpace is basically libraries, bookstores, and independent bookstores, which I think are listed separately from regular bookstores. And I swear I might have sold 2 books through that network. So, I mean, if you take that off and lose those 2 book sales, but you're able to lower your price and make your book more attractive, then it's usually worth doing, I think.
Interesting.
Might be worth doing even if you don't move to Ingram Spark.
Right, just to drop the price, yeah.
Yeah, I try to keep my books low enough with the expanded distribution. I think I make a quarter off the thing, so it's really not worth it. So yeah, that's something to consider.
All right, cool. Well, let's just breeze through this foreign rights stuff, and then we'll call it a night. So what I was talking about at the beginning is that Chris was saying, she pretty much handles all this stuff herself, and that she believes you don't need an agent. You just need to kind of get yourself up on the contracts and be willing to look stuff up. Although kind of what I heard is that you often get much simpler contracts from these other countries than you do from the US with all of our our love for legalese and lawyer stuff. So, I mean, I think mine was, I signed one that was only 3 pages long when I did the German one. Joe, was yours like that too? Pretty simple?
Yep, about 3 pages long. There was only 1 sentence I needed changed.
You just, and they can be pretty straightforward. And if they're not, you can hire an IP attorney. But as far as, they kind of talked about what to do, and that, when you get the contracts, they will be in English. They're the language of the copyright owner. That should be something you get. And that reasons you may want to do it, like you're probably not going to make that much money because a lot of these are smaller countries and they may only offer you like $500 for the rights to your book. And in my case, in the past, I've kind of ignored it because has been like that. They only want 1 book, and it's basically, I figured I'd have to pay as much for an IP attorney to look at the contract as they were going to pay me for the rights for the book. But one thing that was mentioned was that even if maybe they only do 1 or 3 books of yours, and they translate it into their language, and maybe they do okay, but maybe you never see any other money other than that initial 500 or 1,000 maybe that you got, is that you may find that readers in the country read English also. And so if they become fans of your work through finding it in the translated language, they may actually go and then find you on Amazon Japan or whatever and buy your English ebooks. So it's kind of a way to build a fan base. So it's something I'm not going to brush off in the future if somebody approaches me. And I am on my to-do list is to actually make a page on my website that says foreign rights, in the menu, and kind of state what I'm interested in and what I'm willing to do. Because I'm probably going to say I'm more interested in deals that are at least 3 books in a series rather than just 1 book. And just, to put a couple things up, like these are the titles that are available for foreign rights purchase. Because I think if you're, I don't know, what do you have to mid-list, whatever we call ourselves, you will find that eventually you do get folks reaching out to you. And it can be the same thing as we were talking about with Hollywood. Even if you're not a huge seller, if somebody happened to read the story and they liked it, they may want to translate it. Just don't expect huge offers of money from these things, but it may be worth doing anyway. Is there anything else? I'm breezing over here, trying to skim through too quickly. Something to remember is your book is only as good as the translation, so it's hard to judge. I would probably just take the money and hope they do a good job. But you can Google the publisher and see, have I heard of them before? Is there anything online, or do they have a good reputation? Maybe find out some of the other titles. Right now, it is pretty difficult to go out and find people in other countries to publish your books. It's more of this is what to do when you get approached. What is the name of that marketplace? Do you remember, Joe? They said it wasn't very good. Or maybe it was Joanna that said it wasn't very good. IPL, was that what it was? There's a website where you can put stuff you're willing to sell the rights on, and supposedly publishers from other countries can find you on there. But it sounds like right now it's still not that useful. There aren't that many publishers actually using it. So it is possible, they were saying, if there's like a country where you really want to be in, because you think, like maybe Germany we've talked about as being really popular with fantasy, maybe you can pitch a publisher in another country, say like, hey, here's my 8-book series. It sold really well in the US and Australia or wherever you're big. Would you be interested in publishing it? And it's just kind of the same process as pitching a publisher here, though you'll probably find less rigmarole, it sounds like, in some of the small publishing houses in smaller countries.
Looks like the 2 places are IPR Licensing, which is just iprlicense.com, and pubmatch.com.
Yeah, it sounded like good ideas, but they may not really be there yet.
Yeah.
Basically
what was said about them is like, you can put your thing there, and it's basically the equivalent of just like putting up a sign saying, hey, these are available for licensing. It's not going to be sending that to a list of people who want it. People will browse and see. So you won't necessarily get something just by listing it there, but if it's listed there, you can point people to it and say, hey, so here's the information.
Yeah, I think it's probably most likely somebody interested is going to come to your website and contact you. So that's probably better off just to have your information on your website about what your policy is, what books you're considering being available for foreign rights. And yeah, so that's on my to-do list. With the website, I still need to revamp. Maybe by 2027 or something, I'll be there.
I think you say that every episode. Yeah, I need to work on the website.
Well, I actually had somebody design one, and then I didn't like the design. So what are you going to do? It's hard being a fussy little artist, author / personality. Jeff, was there an older question on foreign rights that, do you remember? I remember you mentioned it over there in the chat, but you may have scrolled way off your radar by now.
Yeah, let's see. Talk amongst yourselves while I scroll up and see if I find anything.
All right. Well, and just a couple. Let me just read my last notes here. Was what kind of expectations should you have for foreign rights if you do accept a deal? Just because your book sells well in the U.S. doesn't mean you're going to sell it in another country well. Just because you have an agent doing foreign rights doesn't mean your book will sell either. That was something else I had in my notes. The reason Chris wasn't a big fan of agents for negotiating foreign rights is that minimum you would get less than 20%. You would get 20% less money because the agent's taking their cut, and you would also get less money because they work through a bank with banking fees rather than just going through PayPal. And also, you can just end up with some bad contracts. If you're doing this yourself, you can make sure it's a limited term thing, right? You give them however many years you're comfortable giving them the rights to your manuscript, and then if they haven't put out a translation within a couple years, you can take your rights back, so long as you guys negotiate that in the contract. Expectations, just also they were saying markets for different countries are very different. So if you sold well in the US, like I said, it doesn't mean you're going to sell well in another country. But interestingly, if you didn't sell that well in the US, it's always possible you can become the David Hasselhoff of Germany or another country and become very popular in Asia. Who knows with your epic fantasy? Especially if you're writing, every now and then some people do epic fantasy with like a Asian flair or inspired by like German or Egypt or something like that for the historical background. So you never know, that might prompt it to be a little more popular in those countries where that is part of their history. All right, he did not find it, so.
Oh, I did too. I said, "Are there?" Okay, found the question.
Oh, we covered it.
Yeah, you guys pretty much covered it. I mean, Sarah was asking, how do you sell the foreign rights for the books? She knows there's a website, but you have to wait for them to get back to you. She'd love to either sell foreign rights or translate myself. Not sure how, though.
Right. Translations are expensive.
Don't use Google Translate.
Well, no, but even with if you have a good translator, high four figures can't expect to pay for a novel. And I've just talked to so many people who have done it and then not made the money back. It's very hard for us, if English is your only language, to know how to market and write ad copy in Spanish, or maybe Jeff will do some for you, but in German, not just speaking it, but do it well, enough to sell a book and be active on a Facebook page or something like that. But I think the best way is, if you're interested, like I said, write about it on your website and then let your fans know. If you've got a pretty good sized mailing list, that's kind of how my German it's getting to be late. German translation came about. Was just a reader reached out to me like, "Hey, I happen to be a German translator." And I was like, "Well, I don't think that's a good idea because I can't pay you that much." He's like, "I'll do it for free and then I'll pitch the publisher." I was like, "Well, this sounds like a better deal. I'm more interested now." But so you never know who might be in your readership that might have some kind of connection. So put it out there that it's something you're looking for. All right, that's it for the notes I have. Hollywood can wait for another day. That was a 2-hour lecture, the Hollywood stuff. The basic thing was be very wary because there are a lot of scammers over there, and don't talk on the phone to people. Get everything in email so you have a written record of it that you can print out should things go bad down the line.
Definitely.
That appealed to me. I was like, don't talk on the phone. I can make all kinds of excuses not to talk on the phone with people. I hate those phones.
Yeah, but then again, you never know when opportunity is going to fall in your lap. I had a nice Romanian artist write me up on an email and say, "Hey, I'm doing a dissertation for his art school. Can I turn one of your books into a graphic novel?" And I went, "Yes, please." So he's turning one into it. So he's doing a really good job with it so far.
Sounds good. All right. Do you guys have any final thoughts before we head out?
Not for me. I think you guys did a pretty good job of covering a whole lot of information in a short amount of time.
Yeah, I'd say this was a pretty information-dense episode already.
All right. Well, hopefully, and it was a pretty good conference, and you can check out their website. I think it was on Dean's website somewhere. If you look up like Dean Wesley Smith online workshops, they've got quite a few. Some are in person, some are just online courses. Whatever you're interested in. I know in the indie community, a lot of people like to point out that they don't usually sell huge amounts of their ebooks when they publish them, but they really have a lot of experience in publishing overall. And they're kind of like, I'm kind of the same way with just putting books out and just loving the writing and not wanting to spend a zillion hours on the marketing stuff. But so I can understand that thought. And they do have a lot of things going on in the background that provides their income. So I learned a few things, whereas at a lot of conferences, it's kind of the same stuff you hear on the podcast. So they're fun to network and go see people in person, but sometimes you come away thinking with only a couple of new ideas maybe, and you're like, well, I just heard that same stuff on a podcast last week. So that's about it for us. Next couple weeks, we'll have a guest. We do have some more questions that I didn't get to. You guys were good enough. I asked on Twitter for questions, and I actually got a bunch, so I copied them down for probably, I think the New Year's episode, it's just us. Maybe we'll do some resolutions or what we see, what we think is going to be coming in 2018, since we're also wise here, you know. Until then, thanks for listening, everyone. And that's it. Have a good week.
You guys take it easy. We'll see you next time.
So long, everybody.
Bye-bye.